Okay, so this is the second video on the EU and how it works. I want to talk today about whether the EU is or isn't democratic. And the first thing I'd say is that's obviously a binary, right? It either is or it isn't. That's not quite true. I think a better question would be, how democratic is it? My personal view is that it can absolutely be improved, but I want to kind of relate it to the UK. So in the UK, the government sets out its priorities in something called the Queen's Speech, and in the EU, the leaders of the 28 countries, all the different countries across the European Union, get together and collectively they write a very similar document which lays out their priorities. So the government in the UK will ask the civil service to draft bills based on those priorities, and in the EU, the Commission drafts bills based on the priorities of the 28 member states. Either way, they get drafted and they get passed on to the second section of the process. And in the UK, that's the House of Commons, and in the EU, it's the European Parliament. So the European Parliament is elected by something called proportional representation. That means every vote counts exactly the same, and the number of votes a party gets matches the number of seats it gets. The number of MEPs that each country has is broadly based on population. Very, very small countries like Cyprus get a little bit of a boost so they don't feel that their voice is completely ignored, but frankly it's fairly inconsequential next to, you know, something like the UK, which just has a much bigger voice. And in the UK, it's the UK House of Commons. Now the UK House of Commons is elected by a completely different system called first past the post, and the House of Commons is unusual in many legislatures in the first world in that you can lose by number of votes but win the most seats. Most UK governments lose in terms of number of votes, just to put that out there. Whereas in the EU, in the Parliament, you have to get over half the votes to get over half the seats. If they say yes, whether it's the House of Commons or whether it's the European Parliament, it moves on to the third stage, which in the UK is the House of Lords, and in the EU is the Council of Ministers. So the House of Lords in the UK is Lords. They're appointed by the Prime Minister. There is sort of a gentleman's agreement in place that the Prime Minister won't appoint a huge number of Lords to get what he or she wants done. In the EU, it moves into something called the Council of Ministers. And the way that works is one minister from each of the 28 member states come together to talk about the particular legislation, the particular bill before them. The way that works is, if it's a bill about finance, if that's what the regulation is about, then it will be the person connected to finance who comes. So in the UK, that would be the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the person who's in charge of the Treasury. That's George Osborne currently. And the way that voting works in the Council of Ministers, it's one minister from each country, but if you're from a country with a bigger population, you get a bigger vote. Your vote counts more. So the UK minister has a much bigger vote than the minister from, say, Cyprus or Greece. And again, the Council of Ministers, or in the UK, the House of Lords, can amend it, they can change it, and they can accept or reject it. If they accept it, and the changes that they have made are identical to the ones that the Parliament has made, or in the UK, the House of Commons, and if everyone agrees, in the EU it would be the Parliament and the Council of Ministers agrees on the changes, and in the UK it would be the House of Commons and the House of Lords agree on the changes. If that agreement is reached in either system, the law is passed. It is now the law. Congratulations. And that's the process for EU law. So it's drafted by the Commission, amended, approved and rejected by the Parliament, and then amended, approved or rejected by the Council of Ministers. And if the Parliament and the Ministers agree on the same draft of the law, then it becomes the law. In the UK, the law is created by the government, drafted by the civil service, and it then goes to the House of Commons, and they amend, accept or reject it. It goes to the Lords, amend, accept or reject it. If the Lords and the Commons agree, it becomes the law. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that explained the process a little bit better. I'm going to do one more video on sort of the values behind all of this. So, bye.